A man had suffered for 38 years, and there he was, lying beside a pool in Jerusalem, waiting for someone to help him into the water. When Jesus stopped in front of him, he could have healed him on any day of the week, and the day on which he healed him was the Sabbath. The day he knew would provoke controversy. Now, the Gospel does not describe this as an immediate medical emergency. It describes a man who had lived with this condition for 38 years. Nothing in the story suggests Jesus had to act before sundown. He acted anyway. And then you keep reading the Gospels, and you realize something. He keeps doing this. In Mark chapter 3, there is a man with a withered hand in the synagogue. The religious leaders are already watching, not to worship, but to catch him. And Jesus does not hide it. He tells the man to stand up in the middle of the synagogue, in front of the very men watching to accuse him. And then he heals him. The text says they went out and immediately began to plot how they might destroy him. A woman bent over for 18 years, called forward publicly on the Sabbath. A man born blind, given his sight on the Sabbath. A man swollen with disease, healed at a Pharisee's own table on the Sabbath. Long-standing conditions, every one of them. Nothing in these stories suggests he had to act before sundown. Again and again. These healings land on the one day that carried the greatest cost. It is easy to read these stories as Jesus simply breaking an old religious rule to make a point about grace. But that reading misses something. Jesus never said the Sabbath was wrong. He never told anyone to stop keeping it. Luke tells us plainly that going to the synagogue on the Sabbath was his custom, week after week after week. So he was not attacking the day. He was arguing about its meaning. Take a breath. Because in the next few minutes we are going to look at what that day was actually given for, what modern research says about a human body kept permanently under demand, and why Jesus repeatedly confronted interpretations that had turned a gift into a burden. It was never meant to be a burden, and he never stopped proving it. Before we go back into the Gospels, we have to talk about what happens to a human body that never stops. In the early 1990s, neuroendocrinologist Bruce McEwen and physician Elliot Stella developed a concept that would become central to modern stress research. Allostatic load. Your body has a stress response system, and that system is not your enemy. When a threat appears, cortisol and adrenaline rise. Your heart rate climbs. Your immune system shifts into a defensive posture. That is allostasis. Stability achieved through change. It is designed to switch on, and then it is designed to switch off. The problem is not that your body has a stress response. The problem begins when that response is activated again and again, without enough recovery. When it stays on too long, when it never fully shuts down because the demand never fully ends. The system designed to save you in the short term can begin to cost you in the long term. That accumulated cost is what they called allostatic load. And it is not poetry. It shows up in measurable places, in blood pressure, in inflammatory markers, in the way the brain itself remodels under prolonged stress. And then there is a second finding, and this one is even more uncomfortable. A researcher in occupational psychology named Sabine Sonnentag spent years studying what actually restores a person after work. Her work helped establish one of the most important concepts in recovery research: psychological detachment, the ability to mentally disengage from work, not merely to physically leave it. Because a person can be off the clock, at home, on a sofa, on a beach, and still be running the same loops, still rehearsing the conversation, still checking, still braced for the next thing. The hours were free, but psychologically, the demand had never ended. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is exactly where a lot of well-meaning content goes wrong. None of this proves the Sabbath. There is no study showing a 7-day clock inside you waiting for a religious observance. Anyone telling you that science has confirmed the Sabbath is selling you something. The claim is smaller. And honestly, more interesting. Modern research cannot prove the theology of a single day, but it keeps confirming something an exhausted culture refuses to hear. A human body cannot remain under demand indefinitely without paying for it, and time away helps most, when the mind actually gets away too. Which leaves us with a question. If that is true, why would anyone take a day built for exactly that and turn it into one more thing you can fail at? To understand what Jesus was doing, you have to understand what that day was for in the first place. The Sabbath command appears twice in the giving of the law. And the two versions give two different reasons. In Exodus, the reason is creation. God rested on the seventh day, and so the day is set apart. But in Deuteronomy, the reason is something else entirely. Remember that thou wast a servant in the land of Egypt. Remember that you were a slave. This command is given to a people emerging from generations of slavery, a nation whose memory had been shaped by forced labor, by quotas of bricks for someone else's kingdom, people who had never owned a single day of their own lives. And the command does not stop with them. It names the son, the daughter, the servant, the stranger inside the gates. Even the animals. Everyone stops, which means no one can be made to keep working while somebody else rests. Do you see what that day actually was? It was a weekly declaration that you are not a slave, that your worth is not your output, that the world will keep turning for one entire day without your labor, and you will still be held. That is the gift. Now watch what happened to it. By the time of Jesus, fierce debates surrounded what counted as lawful activity on the Sabbath. The Gospels themselves show the arguments: healing, carrying, plucking grain. The intention was to honor the command. But in these encounters, Jesus exposes what happens when protecting a gift becomes more important than the person the gift was made for. Go back to Luke chapter 13. The woman bent over for 18 years. Jesus calls her forward and says, "Woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity." Loosed, untied. The ruler of the synagogue is furious. He tells the crowd there are 6 days for work. Come and be healed on one of those. And Jesus answers with the sharpest argument in the entire Sabbath conflict. Doth not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or his ass from the stall and lead him away to watering? Every one of them did it. Their own practice permitted untying an animal on the Sabbath so it could drink. And then he lands it. And ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan hath bound, lo, these 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day? He used their own word against them. Loose. You untie a rope for an animal on this day, without a second thought. She has been tied for 18 years, and you want her bound for one more night, on the day God gave for release? That is the pattern. Jesus was not abolishing the Sabbath. He was revealing what it was for. In these stories, every Sabbath healing becomes an argument made in flesh and bone, not restriction, release. And he said it out loud in Mark chapter 2, in one sentence that should have ended the debate forever. The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Made for man. A gift given for human beings, not a burden human beings were created to serve. And notice what Luke places near the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. He stands up in the synagogue on the Sabbath and reads from the scroll of Isaiah, to preach deliverance to the captives, to set at liberty them that are bruised. Then he sits down, and says the words are fulfilled today, on a Sabbath, in a synagogue, announcing release and the Sabbath healings that follow. Read almost like that declaration taking flesh. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you stopped and did not feel guilty about it? Not scrolling, not collapsing on the couch, too tired to move. Not that exhausted half rest where the body is still and the mind is still working the problem. Real stopping. Most of us cannot remember because somewhere along the way you are taught something you may never have said out loud. That stopping means laziness. That rest has to be earned. That your value disappears the moment your productivity does. And if you grew up in church, there may be a second layer underneath it. That rest is one more thing you are failing at. Listen to me carefully. That is exactly what Jesus stood against. Not the day, the weight that had been tied onto it. He did not walk into those synagogues to hand you another rule. He walked in to untie one. He was restoring the gift beneath the burden. And listen to how he described his own work. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. All you who labor, all you who are heavy laden. He is not speaking to lazy people. He is speaking to the ones carrying the most. The ones who wake at 3 a.m. running the numbers. The ones who have not had one unhurried day in years and have quietly started to believe that this is simply what adulthood is. He looks at that and he does not say, try harder. He says, come. Now, I told you I would be honest about the science. So let me be honest at the end, too. No study can prove the theology of a single day. Nothing in a laboratory can measure a gift. But the research does say something plainly. A body under continuous demand accumulates a cost, and time away helps most when the mind is actually allowed to leave the demand behind. Which means the exhaustion you are carrying is not a character flaw. You are not breaking because you are weak. You are breaking because you are made with a limit, and you have been living as though you do not have one. The man at the pool waited 38 years. The woman stayed bent for 18. And when Jesus reached them, he did not tell them to hold on a little longer. He set them free on the spot, on the day made for exactly that. And when some religious leaders opposed him for it, and those conflicts became part of the opposition gathering around him, he did not apologize. He never apologized for putting mercy above the burden, and his invitation to the weary still stands. So here is what I want to leave with you. You have permission to stop, not because you finished, not because you earned it, but because the one who made you gave rest as a gift. And when people turn that gift into another burden, Jesus stood in the middle of the controversy and pointed back to its purpose. The Sabbath was made for man. It was never meant to become the obstacle. It was a gift of release, a reminder that you were never created to live like a slave. And if you have forgotten how to stop, maybe that is the invitation you needed to hear today. If something in this reached you, you are welcome to subscribe and keep exploring the place where Scripture, the human body, and the created world meet.